It's June. I'm back. David Rothkopf joins me today at 19 minutes after headlines and sound. So great to be back. Thank you very much for supporting me on my week off. I hope you appreciated my conversations with Kenneth C. Davis on the history of Memorial Day and, of course, Allison Jaslow on Memorial Day. Also had a great conversation with S.E. Cup, who many of you emailed or contacted me and said, got a few things wrong during a conversation. But I am here and back and refreshed and ready for an exciting week of episodes and great guests to learn more about what the hell is happening in the world, coming at you from Earth One. That's the ideology on the planet that I broadcast from. Happy to be here with you and hope to see you on Thursday night at our subscriber hangout. Of course, this is what we call independent media here in 2024. I cannot do this daily show without your support. Thank you for the new subscribers over the break. That was really cool to see, including Glenn Kirshner became a subscriber. I'm supposed to be talking to him tomorrow. We will see, but appreciate it. Go to patreon.com/Pete Dominic to support the show. You can always pay more for the show. I cannot do this daily program without your support. So please check it out right now and support us. So many benefits for subscribers. One little one, of course, is your vitamin N, vitamin nature photos. Send them over. It's here at the beginning of June. Summer has unofficially begun. So hook me up with some brand new nature photos. Get outside, take pictures, no man-made objects in them. Send them to me and I will include one every morning in the subscriber email that you get along with that day's show. standupwithpete@gmail.com. Send them on over. All right. Well, I'm going to get right to the news and headlines. We'll talk more about everything else that's happening in the world, in my world, in your world on and at our Hangout Thursday night at 8 East. But there is obviously a lot happening in the world. Of course, I took the week off during Trump's conviction when it happened. I celebrated with you on Discord. Obviously, paid attention to it, put out a couple of tweets. Lots to say about that. Can't wait to hear your view on it, what you think it means for the campaign, for America, for politics, how it should be interpreted. But let's get to those headlines, and I'm experimenting this week with video for just the headlines. Going to put out a video segment just for the headlines on TikTok and YouTube and Instagram and the rest. We'll see how it goes. Piloting this week. Let's do it. Well, you know about this. On Friday, President Biden endorsed a new Israeli ceasefire proposal that included the possibility of enduring the end of fighting, saying that Hamas was no longer capable of launching any more October 7th style attacks. President Biden said it's time for this war to end. Well, in response, Benjamin Netanyahu, Israel's embattled prime minister, said that the war would not end until all hostages were returned and Hamas was eliminated. Hamas reacted positively to the proposal, but Israeli forces advanced into central Rafah in Gaza, pushing deeper into the southern Gaza city. For their part, U.S. congressional leaders invited Netanyahu to address Congress, which has been very controversial, no set date. And a day after President Biden called for the truce, Benjamin Netanyahu reiterated that Israel would not agree to a permanent ceasefire as long as Hamas retained power there, so the entire thing might not mean much. Also, two far-right members of the Israeli government threatened to quit the coalition should Netanyahu accept a ceasefire plan laid out by Biden. So really, did we accomplish anything at all? Oh, and there were thousands, hundreds of thousands of protesters rallying in the biggest city in Israel, Tel Aviv, as well as other cities, calling on Netanyahu to accept that ceasefire proposal. So who knows? In South Africa, the ANC failed to win an outright majority in the national election for the first time since the end of apartheid. But in Mexico, they elected the first woman president ever. So that's a pretty big deal. That's right. Claudia Sheinbaum from the leftist Morena party was elected president of Mexico. Sunday's vote, the largest election in the country's history. More than 98 million voters registered to cast a ballot. In Mexico, more than 20,000 positions set to be filled, and voting was suspended due to violence. Many deaths on the campaign for this election, so we look at least a little bit better than them, except for the fact that, well, they elected a woman, and of course, we still haven't. In other news, Senator Joe Manchin apparently left the Democratic Party. Don't let the door hit your ass on the way out. He's now apparently going to be an independent, whatever that means. The move won't alter Democrats' control of the Senate, but it could allow Joe Manchin, who previously said he would retire, to now run again. Haven't we had enough of Joe Manchin? A military veteran became the latest January 6th insurrectionist to get convicted to prison. He was convicted of injuring a police officer's hand during the January 6, 2021 riot at the U.S. Capitol. He He was sentenced on Friday to 5 years in prison. John George Todd III declined to address the court before the U.S. District Judge who sentenced him, but the judge said that Todd, a U.S. Marine Corps veteran, hasn't showed any remorse for his role in damaging the country's fragile democratic institutions. Bye-bye, John George Todd. Enjoy prison. Try not to become an insurrectionist again, or maybe do. All is not well in Texas, my friends. The Texas Supreme Court on Friday rejected a challenge to the state's abortion ban in response to a lawsuit filed last year by a group of women who had serious pregnancy complications. The ruling from the 9 justices, who of course are all Republicans, was unanimous. Sad news over the weekend. Michelle Obama's mother, who helped raise the Obama daughters at the White House, died at age 86. Marion Robinson was remembered by her daughter and millions of other Americans in a moving tribute on Instagram. I really liked reading that about Marion Robinson. Apparently, North Korea has sent 1,000 balloons filled with trash into South Korea in the past few days. Weird headline. And Dr. Pepper is now tied with Pepsi as the second most popular soda in the U.S. Behind Coke. Who are you Dr. Pepper drinkers? It's increased its market share through advertising and all kinds of novel flavors, according to the Wall Street Journal. Coming up this week, folks, this Thursday, June 6th, will mark the 80th anniversary of D-Day, when approximately 160,000 Allied troops 8 decades ago carried out the largest seaborne invasion in human history, and it will be the last major D-Day anniversary every 5 years. It's called a major anniversary that will probably have living veterans in attendance. Organizers are going all out, so pay attention to that this week. Also, India will have their general election results announced on Tuesday, tomorrow. The Tribeca Film Festival begins on Wednesday of this week. The European Parliament elections begin on Thursday. In London, Fashion Week begins on Friday, and a deadline for Prime Minister Netanyahu to come up with a post-war plan for Gaza set by a centrist member of Israel's war cabinet. That's this Saturday, and those are your headlines that I've gathered for you for Monday, June 3rd, that's the date. And of course, happy Pride Month for all of those who celebrate. And I think that's it. Those are your headlines, and check them out on TikTok and YouTube and Instagram and everywhere else, if I can get them posted up. It's just an experiment this week. The video version of headlines available. Subscribe, and hopefully it'll promote this podcast, and you appreciate it. Tell your friends, share that as well widely on all those social media platforms. And now to the second part of every day's show opening. This is your sound bites, sound clips that I've gathered for you. Monday is usually pretty comprehensive and robust when I do it, and I usually do it because of all of the Sunday shows. This first clip I really liked and went viral over the weekend. This is not from one of the Sunday shows, but this is from one of the most popular sports broadcasters in the country. His name is Colin Cowherd, and he went viral with this 2-minute and 45-minute rant. I thought I would share this with you first.
You know, I've said this about Trump before. He's trying to sell me an America that doesn't exist. Let's say I got busted for some really bad crime in court, a drug crime, and my wife did too, in a separate case. And then so did one of my kids, my manager, my agent, and my attorney. It would be reasonable to conclude that I'm shady and involved in a business that's not terribly legal. Well, Donald Trump is now a felon. His campaign chairman was a felon. So is his deputy campaign manager, his personal lawyer, his chief strategist, his national security advisor, his trade advisor, his foreign policy advisor, his campaign fixer, and his company CFO. They're all felons, judged by the company you keep. It's a cabal of convicts. It's not that I'm not willing to vote for conservatives. I said I would have voted for Mitt Romney. Seemed like a decent family man. I liked the second Bush, George Bush Sr.'s son. I liked him. I thought he was a decent American, a decent human. I liked his wife, Laura Bush. I thought they were decent people. If everybody in your social circle is a felon, I don't think it's rigged. I don't think the world's against you. And to get people to agree on anything, 34 counts, 0 for 34. I mean, that's a batting slump even the New York Mets could be impressed with. 0 for 34. When you're constantly trying to sell me on an America that I don't see, I'm not saying inflation's not an issue, but I get on airplanes all the time, and it's not a bunch of rich people. I get on planes, there's people in normal clothes, they don't look rich to me, and the planes are all full, and the hotels are all full, and the freeways are all full. That means people are going to work. You're trying to sell me on this story and this narrative that's just not true. Trump's entire game plan is the country is in a free fall. But when everybody in your team, everybody in your group, your cabal is a felon, maybe the world's not against you. Stop trying to sell me on everything's rigged. The country's falling into the sea. The economy's terrible. The economy's okay. It's not like on fire, but the America that I live in is imperfect. But compared to the rest of the world, I think we're doing okay.
All right. Thank you, Colin Cowherd. I don't know how much I trust the guy's views on politics. I mean, he said he liked George W. Bush, who was arguably the second worst president of all time, said he would have voted for him after the Iraq War, but I get the point he's making. All right, well, let's head over to MSNBC, where Jen Psaki had the former FBI director, stupid James Comey. Well, I'm no James Comey fan, but I still think, well, he was the former FBI director, and she asked him what life behind bars would look like for Donald Trump. So I thought this was fun to share.
Before the verdict, you had said it was highly likely to result in a conviction. That's obviously what happened. A year ago, you made this prediction about Trump wearing an ankle bracelet. Do you think he's going to be wearing an ankle bracelet or be in jail after the sentencing?
I don't know. Seems unlikely, but I've never seen a defendant beg for it more by attacking the judge, attacking the jury, attacking the witnesses. One of the key things in assessing what sentence is appropriate, a judge looks at, so are you sorry for what you did? Are you respecting the system? This defendant is running the other way.
So a lot of people have suggested that there are a range of factors that would make it difficult to put the system has not been tested in this way. Do you agree with that it would be difficult or nearly impossible for the law enforcement institutions to put him in actual jail?
No, they would just put him in a double wide somewhere out near the fence, out in the grass. And he would eat there, he'd shower there, he'd exercise there, he'd be away, as Danya Perry said, from general population. But it's obviously doable.
Oh, well, that sounds fun. Trump's going to be living in a double wide somewhere. We'll see about that. All right, now let's head over to one of Trump's former lawyers. I thought this was interesting. Former Trump attorney Joe Tacopina appeared on MSNBC's Politics Nation with Reverend Al Sharpton and argued against the ridiculous notion that Joe Biden and the federal government were behind the Manhattan DA's case. Again, this is Trump's former lawyer.
Look, I understand there's a political motivation to a lot of what's going on in our country today. And everyone wants to sort of paint the broad brush and, this is a political vendetta and it's weaponization of the justice system. This is a state case. This is different than the Jack Smith cases. OK, this is not a federal prosecution. Joe Biden or anyone from his Justice Department have absolutely zero to do with the Manhattan District Attorney's Office. They have no jurisdiction over him. They have no contacts with him. They have no control, certainly, over him. So to say that Joe Biden brought this case is one of the most ridiculous things I've heard. We know that's not the case. And even Trump's lawyers know that's not the case.
Now, wait right there, because as you say, even Trump's lawyers know that's the case. You were attorney with Trump. You were on Trump's case early and got off the case. So you're speaking as one that knew as you signed into work for Trump, which you explained on this show why, and you explained why you got out, that this had nothing to do with Joe Biden or any of the federal government trying to lean in on Donald Trump.
The federal government has no input on the Manhattan District Attorney. It's a state prosecution. So the federal government and Joe Biden cannot direct, command, request a state prosecutor to bring charges. They have absolutely no jurisdiction. The same way the president, be it Trump or Biden, cannot pardon anyone who's convicted of a state crime. That's only left to the governor of that particular state. So people who say that make it scary that they really don't know the law or what they're talking about. To suggest that Joe Biden would be behind a Manhattan District Attorney's prosecution is silly.
All right, rarely do I play either Cusay or Uday on the program, but stupid Eric Trump really stepped in some shit with his tone-deaf comment about the African-American vote when he said that black folks are swinging over to Donald Trump in spades.
They're literally feeding him, certain segments of the population that he might not have had in 2016 and 2020, because for the first time they realize that the system's coming down, that he's the victim. He's the victim that oftentimes some of their communities were. And you see them swing. You look at the African-American vote, right? That's swinging over to Donald Trump in spades.
In spades, right. Okay, well, always love it when Fox News brings in their expert on the black community to weigh in on what they think in spades. By the way, if you can look it up, one of the definitions in the dictionary is it's often an offensive word using an insulting, contemptuous term for a black person. Right. Because, of course, black people can relate to Trump now because they also have their other people pay tens of millions of dollars for their lawyers when they leave their mansion in a private jet with trial for Secret Service while remaining on bond after insulting the judge and his family and violating court orders, writes Ron Filipkowski on Twitter. Okay, well, what else do I have for you here? One of the hollowest of barrels, Kevin McCarthy, crawled out from under his rock and joined Manu Raju on CNN to say that he thinks it's a great idea for the Republican Party to nominate a convicted felon.
But you know politics. Is it a good idea, separating out your view of the verdict, is it a good idea for the Republican Party to nominate a convicted felon?
Listen, is it a good idea that Donald Trump is the nominee? The answer is 100% yes.
And it's no secret that Kevin McCarthy hates Matt Gaetz. They're both terrible, so I love to watch them fighting. But Manu Raju asked Kevin McCarthy if he had it out for Matt Gaetz. And McCarthy, well, he doesn't hold back.
But you want Gaetz to lose. Clearly, you're supporting his primary opponent. Why do you want him out? Is it simply because he led the charge?
No, I just don't think Gaetz is and if you think about it, if there's anybody who should go to trial, I think you can get away with it. Gaetz is one who shouldn't be convicted in the trial.
Why? What do you say?
Well, we all know you can't sleep with underage women and think you can get away with it.
He denies
that as an individual. Well, the women don't. I don't think so. There's people in jail because of it, and I think that's a place that people should have a point. I just don't think that as an individual should be represented in Congress. I don't think the constituents would want that either.
All right. Well, if you want to know what the disgraced former president said on Fox and Friends, you're going to have to check some other media outlet. He sat down with my old friend Will Cain as well as two others on yesterday and said all kinds of controversial things. And I'll just say this, that the interview was heavily edited, so I'm not sure what they didn't include, but I thought that was interesting. All right. Those are all the clips I've got for you from the Sunday shows. There was more, but I am out of time. I do want to bring you some laughs, as I always do here at the end of the news segment and the sound bites. Let's go to NBC's Seth Meyers with an epic rant of all of the things Trump is and has done wrong and is wrong before becoming a convict.
Well, here we are, you guys. Donald Trump is now the presumptive GOP nominee for president again for a third time, despite the fact that he's a twice impeached, four-time criminal indictee and racist who's been found liable for fraud and sexual abuse, banned from doing business in the state of New York for 3 years, owes over $500 million in fine, took millions from foreign governments while he was president, tried to extort a foreign country to interfere in an election in 2020, and encouraged another to help him win in 2016, actively undermined the nation's response to a once-in-a-lifetime pandemic, and let a deadly disease spiral out of control. It's about to go on trial for breaking campaign finance laws by paying hush money to cover up an affair during the 2016 campaign. Orchestrated a months-long coup attempt that culminated in a violent insurrection to disrupt the peaceful transfer of power and install him as an unelected dictator. Stole classified documents and obstructed attempts to get them back, has never once won the popular vote and has been routinely rejected by a majority of Americans in election after election. Spews deranged conspiracy theories about everything from climate change to immigration to vaccines to windmills. Glitches on 3-syllable words, 2-syllable words, and 1-syllable words. Cheats at golf. Can't spell his own name, his wife's name, or the words indicted, education, unprecedented, stolen, Denmark, Kentucky, or tap. And is, on top of everything else, the single weirdest and most off-putting human being on the face of the planet. And this is the same planet Ted Cruz lives on, so that's saying something.
All right, and that's before his conviction. There you go, Seth Meyers on NBC. All right, well, that's it. Now it's time to get to my guest and your reminder. I can't do it without you. Patreon.com/Pete Dominic. And if you love what I do, you'll love what they do over at the Deep State Network with David Rothkopf. They have so many great podcasts, and you can definitely check out Deep State Radio at the DSRnetwork.com. Of course, Rothkopf is a columnist at the Daily Beast. He's prolific on Twitter, on social media, and I love him very much. We caught up with what was happening, the outcome of the conviction, what it means, as well as his very important article about right-wing leaders around the world working together on message in support of fascism and Donald Trump. Great conversation with Rothkopf. I think you're going to like it. Please let him know that you heard him here on the show. That never gets old. Let's do it. Okay, David Rothkopf, thank you very much for joining me. Lots to talk with you about. And we haven't talked in a week. You were off, I was off, but we're back here and talking about the most important issue. At least you are in the world, the most important issues. I'm just watching you.
That's why I'm here, Pete. Try to fill in the gaps while you're off having fun.
Yes. I was having so much fun, but I am back, and I'm really having fun reading your latest at the Daily Beast. It's super fun. It's titled The Very Real Threat of Right-Wing Leaders Cheering on Trump. Right-wing leaders around the world have rushed to offer their support to convicted felon. Fun to see in print. Donald Trump. Americans should be very worried about what their collective intentions. You're saying here at home, Republican leaders, obviously conservative pundits, but even more importantly, around the world, and you name them and some of their reactions and how they are reacting. They're coalescing. They're getting it together. What does this all mean?
They're not just coalescing. They're not just getting it together. They're saying the exact same thing. Trump's defense post-conviction of the process was weaponization of the judicial process and witch hunt, and this is going to make me win, and that kind of nonsense. That's all lies, completely made up lies. And I'm not that surprised that MAGA leaders all went out and said the exact same thing because, frankly, he dictates to them what they say. And there was a meeting of the RNC with all the state leaders in which they said, this is what you're going to say about this. But that's how politics works. Not surprised. But when the spokesperson for the Kremlin says the same thing, and Viktor Orban in Hungary says the same thing, and the head of the far-right Italian party said, the deputy prime minister there says the same thing, and Nigel Farage, the head of the right-wing movement in the UK, says the same thing, and other leaders on the right throughout the world, they're just not just mimicking it. They use the words like weaponization or Trump's going to win because of this or these kind of things. They're singing from the same hymnal. And as I say in the piece, that means it's not a conspiracy theory. It's a conspiracy. It's a group of like-minded politicians around the world who want to weaken democratic institutions, who want to weaken the U.S., getting together to support Trump in exactly the same way.
And what are their interests in supporting Donald Trump? Is it simply so they then can do whatever they want if he's in charge of America?
He advances their interest. Vladimir Putin depends on Donald Trump being reelected because Donald Trump will hand him Ukraine. Donald Trump will weaken NATO. Donald Trump will let him do what he wants in Georgia and Transnistria in Moldova and Poland and the Baltics. So for Putin, a Trump win is essential. For these others, they see it as advantageous to their movement. But look, Viktor Orban, every time Republican throws a party anywhere, they seem to invite Viktor Orban. And he goes to Mar-a-Lago and he goes to CPAC. And this guy is an authoritarian. He's an anti-Semite. He's anti-immigrant. It's not that far-fetched to say there is a single global right-wing movement, and that movement has as its objectives helping some oligarchs at the expense of everybody else, using ethno-nationalist language, and seeking to weaken U.S. democratic institutions for different reasons. The Russians want to weaken us. I don't think Trump has thought that many moves ahead. I think he just wants to stay out of the hoosegow.
It would seem the other common thread with many of these countries and their right-wing leaders is they, of course, they're all white. They're mostly Christian, it would seem, of one brand or another. If they are religious, they're often anti-Semitic, as you mentioned. They're anti-immigrant, anti-migrant, and so on. What else would you?
I wouldn't say they're not all white and they're not all Christian. Bibi Netanyahu is part of the movement. He's Jewish. Erdogan in Turkey is part of the movement. He's Muslim. Modi is part of the movement in India, who's just won another election. And he, of course, is Hindu and Indian. But they are all anti-immigrant. They do all play the nationalist card. They do all use racist language. They do gain their strength from uniting a small group within their country against the other. And none of them are particularly fond of democracy or the rule of law.
What about their feelings towards gender equity, women, much less LGBT?
They use a lot of the same language. They are against the LGBTQ community. They talk about being against wokeness. They talk about opposing fake news. They use the same words.
In different languages, I would imagine. I'm trying to think of what they say for wokeness in Hungary.
In Russian and Hungary? I don't know. That's a really good question, but they do use the same kind of terminology.
And a lot of people are obviously talking about American right-wing conservative Republican reaction as well, and you include some of that. I want to, again, we haven't talked. There's so many different ways to look at the verdict, Trump's verdict, what it means for different constituencies, different interests, for politics in general, sir. But what about the reaction? You mentioned this, you touched on it, from Republican senators, Congress people. They're all getting the same message, the same messaging.
It's the same message. They're saying the system's being weaponized there. It's disgusting. It's terrifying, because essentially what they're saying is our judiciary doesn't work, and any verdict that doesn't come out the way we like it is a rigged verdict. There's some subtext that I personally, as a New Yorker, by where I've lived most of my life, find offensive. You couldn't get a fair trial in New York. What does that mean exactly? What is it about New Yorkers that means you couldn't get a fair trial there? Is it because there are a lot of people of color? Is it because there are a lot of Jews? I don't know, but it's code. I get into taxi cabs a lot, and people say to me, "You have a very New York sense of humor." You know what that means? It means you're a Jew.
Yeah.
You know,
that's what I was saying. And I'm sorry that I said that when you got in my cab, which is how we met, folks. People don't know.
Yeah, that's true.
And
it's all captured on Taxi Cab Confessions, by the way.
Rothkopf hadn't even said anything yet. I was like, "You got a funny Jewish face," and he's okay.
Thank you.
Just tell me where you need to go.
And I was like, finally, a cab driver calls it like it is instead of uses these euphemisms.
New Yorkers, how's he going to get a fair trial in New York? I mean, one might argue that New Yorkers have known him longer than anyone before. I remember seeing him, but I'm not saying they're necessarily on the jury. They might be far too young to know the New York Donald Trump.
No, anybody in New York. Look, Donald Trump, I think, got in 2016 12% of the Manhattan vote, something like that. Nobody in Manhattan would vote for Donald Trump. It doesn't matter what neighborhood you're in, doesn't matter what income bracket you're in, doesn't matter what your ethnic background is. You've got grievance with Donald Trump because he's a horrible, sleazy guy. And people have known it in New York City since the 80s. There was a guy named Wayne Barrett. People should go look him up.
I know Wayne Barrett.
But Wayne Barrett was a writer for the Village Voice, which used to be a cool publication that did a lot of research into Donald Trump. And in the 80s, Wayne Barrett was talking about Donald Trump, his relationship with Roy Cohn, his relationship with weirdos on the right. People were exposing him for his first wife, Ivana's family's ties to the Communist Party. They were exposing him for his bankruptcies, for his sleaze. In the late 80s,
working with the mafia
over and over again, emulating John Gotti. That's why who was called the Teflon Don, and he's called Teflon Don. But my sister, who I don't know if we've ever talked about, but my sister in the late 80s wrote a note to Spy Magazine when she was just coming out of college, said, "You need interns." And she went to work for Spy Magazine. And Spy Magazine, on a regular basis, hilarious magazine, went after Trump, called him a short-fingered vulgarian. This was the 80s. So we've been doing this here for 35, 40 years in New York City. And it is literally unfathomable for New Yorkers how anybody could possibly get behind this guy who is the bottom of the bottom. And you could tell he was the bottom of the bottom, by the way, because where's like the first thing he goes to try to get a crowd to cheer for him, because there were these shots of him coming out of Trump Tower and waving to a crowd, and there was no crowd there, which was weird. So what did he do last night in order to look like the crowd loved it?
He went to a UFC match, and he was escorted in like one of the fighters by the head honcho there, Dana, whatever his name is. And then he walked past quarterback Aaron Rodgers, who ignored him because he's with RFK. The whole thing was very emblematic of the United States of American culture.
Yeah, but it is, because the UFC is the bottom of the barrel. I'm sorry. If you like the UFC, if you're out there listening and you like the UFC, you are garbage. Yeah. Okay? Wow. It is pure garbage. It's like the WWE, which, by the way, Trump was deeply involved in fake race wrestling, right? Deeply, because these people will believe any bullshit, and he's a bullshitter. So it's flies to honey, to shit. It's, oh, wait, where do I go to get people who will buy my bullshit? Yeah. And you go there.
He almost has always passed himself off as a fighter, which is obviously preposterous because he's never fought a day in his life, and he can't lift.
No, he's a whiner. He's a whiner. Every time anything goes wrong, it wasn't a fair fight. It's rigged. The judge was on their side. The ref was on their side.
Yep.
It's complete
golf with him, and you can see that.
No, who was that guy, Rick Riley, who wrote a book about how Trump cheats at golf?
You read a book about it?
Because Trump he's a cheater. He's full of shit.
I'm looking it up.
At everything.
Commander in Cheat: How Golf Explains Trump. Rick Riley. That's hilarious.
It's that. There you go. And it's just.
Oh, wow.
Well, do you want to take a break here while you go read?
Yeah, going back to your piece at the Daily Beast, you write about the far right coalescing, rather working together, basically, taking the same message and passing it off. The very real threat of right-wing leaders cheering on Trump. You write, sir, it is, you see, all the same story. It's all one concerted, comprehensive, increasingly successful effort to destroy America and the institutions we have built since World War II from within and from without. And as you watch our freedoms are stripped away, and as you read about Trump's 2025 plan, his desire to pull out of NATO, essentially leave Eastern Europe at the mercy of Putin, it should be clear that this global effort, this international right-wing movement, is positioned to do more damage to us and our allies than did all of the armies of Hitler, Mussolini, Japan, the Kaiser, or Soviet Russia and its satellite states. Sir, that is very hyperbolic. Can you back it up?
Absolutely, because none of those people actually got to us, laid a hand on us, weakened our institutions. Certainly, we sacrificed something in wars against them, many lives, and that's not to be minimized. But you got through World War II, our institutions were stronger. You got through the Cold War, our institutions were stronger. We embraced our own democracy as one of the reasons that we survived all of those things. Is our democracy stronger today as a consequence of this movement, with a corrupted Supreme Court that doesn't think that it has to follow any ethical rules? Is it stronger with a movement that actually led to the first non-peaceful transition of power in American history in 2020, where there's half the country that have been led to believe, as a basis of lies, that our system is rigged, that Donald Trump actually won the presidency in 2020? The reality is that the MAGA far-right movement has weakened the Supreme Court. It's weakened the Congress of the United States. It's weakened the executive branch when Trump took it over. It's weakened our alliances. And while Joe Biden has fought hard to rebuild a lot of those things, the announced plan of Donald Trump is dictator from day one, concentration camps. He said, I will throw out pro-Palestinian protesters from the United States. First Amendment, be damned. He has said, I will throw my opponents in jail. I will use the Justice Department against them. System of justice, be damned. He has said, maybe I should be in office for 3 terms. Constitution, be damned against, or I will suspend the Constitution. Constitution, be damned. Stalin only could dream of doing that kind of stuff to weaken the United States. And here we are. And it's not, oh, this could happen on November 6th. It's happening. The Supreme Court stuff is happening. The coup in the Supreme Court is worse than the coup that occurred on January 6th.
Let's talk about the Supreme Court since you brought it up. I know you didn't want me to tell anybody this because you are someone who believes in altruism, but I know you spent a lot of time on Memorial Day climbing flagpoles and turning American flags right side up. And I think that's heroic. And I know you don't want to discuss it, but I do want to talk about Alito and the Supreme Court.
I am an American hero.
Do you climbing those flag?
I couldn't do it. The reality is I couldn't climb the flagpoles, but I could stand on my head, and it had the same effect.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Same thing if you're holding a flag.
If you see an upside down flag and then you stand on your head, it's right side up.
When you, I got it. When you say that there's a coup at the Supreme Court, how do you want to characterize what's happened there in the current makeup and certainly these decisions? And then obviously what we're about to see happen in June, which is both Pride Month and Americans Lose More Rights Month, it would seem this.
Yeah, but look, the Supreme Court's been at this for a while, right? You have them getting rid of the Voting Rights Act effectively. With Citizens United, they effectively blew up our political system, baked into the cake corruption, this notion that money equals speech literally means people with more money have more speech. So it means that the rich have much more influence in our system than they did. Corporations are people is something that was initiated in the U.S. system in the 19th century. And in fact, since the 14th, I'm sorry you asked, right? But since the 14th Amendment was passed in the wake of the Second Civil War, it has been invoked more on behalf of corporations asserting their equal rights under the law than for people. So we've been at that particular game for a long time. But you've had this gutting of the Voting Rights Act. You've had decisions that have promoted gerrymandering. You've had Citizens United. And you've, of course, had decisions stripping away rights like undoing Roe v. Wade. And you've got this situation now where Clarence Thomas, corrupt, Justice Alito, corrupt, John Roberts says, I'm not going to do anything about it, so he's corrupt. And it's turned itself, the Republicans are always talking about the politicization of our judicial process. What about taking Donald Trump's assertion that he has immunity when he's president, or that presidents have immunity, and A, actually hearing the case since there is no grounds to hear it legally, B, hearing the case and then very slowly reaching a decision, thus pushing off into the future any of the really important federal trials against Donald Trump, and C, and I bet this is what's going to happen in the next couple of weeks when the decision comes down, probably coming up with some completely bullshit decision that says that presidents have immunity for their official acts. Now, is that in the Constitution? No, it's not. Is there any historical grounds for that? No, there is not. Is that the reason we fought the Revolutionary War? So that you wouldn't have somebody placed above the law in our society? Yes, it is. They don't give any shit about that. They're probably going to do that, which will then send back down to the lower court the mandate to say how much of this is official and how much is unofficial. And that's going to lead to a big debate, and that's going to lead to further delays. Now, the whole plan is let's punt this off till after the election. It plays totally into Donald Trump's hands. Is that going to help him? Yeah, sure, it'll help him a lot. It is using the court for political purpose. It is, it's the low point. Since the Dred Scott decision in the 19th century, this is the low point of the Supreme Court. And somebody I read earlier this week said Chief Justice Roberts is now the worst U.S. Chief Justice since Chief Justice Taney, who was the Chief Justice at the time of the Dred Scott decision.
Ooh. Wow, that is some comparison. Congratulations.
Yeah, he's very smooth, and everybody's, oh yeah, he wants the court to be fair, and he's trying his best, and all this bullshit. He was the guy who undid the voting rights decision. He is the guy on whose watch all this stuff has happened. And he's the guy who just last week said to the Senate, when they said, we want to hear from Alito, or we want Alito to recuse himself, he's the guy who said, no, he's not. It's our tradition that Supreme Court justices determine whether they want to recuse themselves. And we're going to uphold that tradition. And we don't go and talk to the Congress because of separation of powers. Meanwhile, by the way, the Republicans on the Hill are going, oh, no, Alvin Bragg has got to come up here and testify, because they don't give a shit about separation of powers when it suits them. It's just, they view the entire legal structure of the United States as a Chinese menu where they can take things from one side, the other side, to however it works to suit their appetite of the moment.
Let's talk about I can keep talking about that, but I want to get to your other important piece of the Daily Beast, and another very important, I think, strategy that we need to try to understand, which is about the reaction to Trump's conviction. You wrote a piece that said this is how Biden should use Trump's conviction against him. You make a lot of really good points here, but to summarize it very briefly, American leaders, politicians at least, the president and other leadership, should be careful not to look too jubilant or triumphant, because it looks as if then they're playing into the narrative of what you already mentioned, the right is saying, which is that you are weaponizing the justice system, as opposed to coming out and saying the justice system has worked, the rule of law has worked, and so on. Start there with Biden.
Look, I think Biden's handled this exactly right. He said this is what presidents say. Presidents say we have an independent judiciary. The process has run its course. The jurors have done their duty. We must recognize the decision of the court. That's what presidents say. That's what he should say. He should not in any way feed the argument that he's playing politics with this, an argument that's impossible to make, by the way, because we're recording this on a Sunday. Tomorrow, Monday, Hunter Biden, his son, is going to trial. So it's very clear. They said it's judicial, it's political. Senator Robert Menendez, one of the most senior Democratic senators, is in trial right now. To say that the Biden administration has played politics is absurd, but don't play into it. Now, having said that, he shouldn't play into it, and Democratic senior elected officials possibly should not play into it. But that's not how politics works right now.
Right.
Politics is hugely distributed process across many platforms, TikTok and Instagram and Facebook and Twitter and Threads and Mastodon and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And most of the content of the political debate in the United States doesn't come from the White House. It comes from political groups, political action committees, individuals, the Pete Dominick Show. It comes from all these different places. And in every single one of those places, Trump should be hit over the head with the fact that he's a convicted felon. Even if editors at newspapers across America say, you shouldn't say convicted felon, because if he was convicted, then he's a felon. So you should just call him a felon. I say you should call him a convicted felon. It sounds worse. He is a convicted felon. He has a flawed character. He poses a threat to the U.S. There's still 54 felony counts that are outstanding against him in the world. He was impeached twice. This is all pieces of the puzzle. This guy is pond scum, the worst person who ever held high political office in the United States. It's not an assertion. It's not a feeling. We have evidence. Independent juries have come to this conclusion, and we need to get that out there. Why? You're not going to convert the guys at the UFC match. Those people, they'll never see a book in their entire lives. But you will convert independent voters, and you will make some Republican voters say, I'm not going to go out and support this guy. I'm not going to vote. It's raining. I'm not going to vote today. And frankly, this election could very well turn on the number of people who on election day say, it's raining, I'm not going to vote today. And we should do everything in our power to ensure that if they were thinking of voting for Trump, they think he's kind of scummy, I'm not going to do it.
What is your conclusion to the question that everybody's asking right now, that this conviction will probably be the only trial we see, much less conviction we see before the election, will have an effect, will help Trump or hurt Trump, will help Biden or hurt Biden. Do you have anything to say about that?
Yeah, of course. It's going to hurt him. First of all, I've seen all these pundits and they stroke their chins and they're like, whoa, this might not help Biden. This could hurt. This could give Trump a boost with his bit. What a load of shit. Nobody's ever seen this before. This has never happened. Nobody knows how it's going to affect them. The polls that have come out most recently seem to suggest that the impact is bigger than people thought. Polls don't mean anything at this point. You don't know how many people were in the sample, whether that sample is actually projectable to the public at large. You don't know whether they're a sample of people who are actual likely voters or not. But being convicted of 34 felony counts is bad. It's bad. It's not going to help him. And if you are some absolutely crazed UFC fan who thinks, oh, yeah, I want to vote for a felon, that's cool, you're already going to vote for Trump. He's not going to gain anybody as a result of this. The only possibility is he's going to lose people. And people say, oh, it could motivate his base. What? This is just, it's just complete nonsense. And I just can't wait. He said, we raised $34 million overnight and blah, 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 blah. That's a lie. And at some point, he's got to file a document with the FEC, and we're going to find out it was just a lie.
Last thing I got to ask you is news breaking now. I haven't paid too much attention to what's going on in the Middle East. I was off, but Reuters reports Biden's Gaza plan, quote, not a good deal, but Israel accepts it. Netanyahu aide says. This is breaking over the last couple of hours. An aide to the prime minister confirmed on Sunday that Israel's accepted a framework deal for winding down the Gaza war, now being advanced by U.S. President Joe Biden, the plan. Though he described it as flawed and needs much work, what can you tell us about this deal and the?
Look, I think there's less here than meets the eye. It may lead in a positive direction, but what Biden, the plan that Biden described, and I think he meant well by describing it, has about as much resemblance to a blueprint as a child's drawing of a house. Oh, wow. It's very rough. There are 3 phases. There'll be a stop for this long. There'll be this kind of release at each phases of the hostage. But there's none of the details of what do they want to achieve in phase 1 and what are the specifics and what will be a deal breaker for the Israelis or what will be a deal breaker for Hamas or what will be the role of the international community and who's signing up to rebuild Gaza and all of that stuff. None of that is in there. Now, why? Because I don't think that's been agreed to. What was the purpose? Biden stood up and he said, the purpose of this is to get Hamas off the dime. No, it isn't. Hamas was off the dime. The purpose of this was to box in Netanyahu. And so what you saw over the past couple of days were massive demonstrations in Tel Aviv saying, Netanyahu, accept Joe Biden's plan, or Netanyahu, accept your plan. In other words, Biden said it was your plan, so you better accept it. I think we're a long way for anything lasting. The plan did not make mention of a 2-state solution. It did not make mention of how you get from here to actually a functioning government in Palestine. It did not make mention of how you get from Netanyahu to a government in Israel that actually gets anything done. And there are people in the Netanyahu administration, Itamar Ben-Gvir, Smotrich, and the others who are the extremists, who said, no way we're doing this. It could, in fact, they said, if you proceed with this, we're going to blow up the government. I think, Biden's doing his best. It was a Hail Mary. And I think the U.S. has tried extremely hard to get this at least to hit the pause button. And maybe it will. But a formula for guaranteed disappointment in the Middle East is believing anything that Netanyahu or Hamas says.
Very well said. All of it. And I listened to your episode from this week over at Deep State Radio. What should the Biden administration do differently?
with Israel, and you had an amazing panel that you assembled, and it was about an hour-long conversation. I learned so much from the perspectives, which certainly were not all in line and agreement. There was a large disagreement, but it was super interesting and very thoughtful, and I highly recommend you go listen to everything that's happening over at Deep State Radio. So,
look, thank you for that. I think it was a good episode. We'll try to keep doing it. We had some other great episodes in the past few days, a great conversation with Nobel Prize-winning economist Joe Stiglitz about progressive economics. We had a great discussion. We have a new podcast called Scylla Consciousness, which is on AI and related issues. And we had as our guest, the White House director of the Office of Science and Technology Policy, Arthi Prabhakar, who's a genius and brilliant. We talked about U.S. AI policy. We've got our couple of daily podcasts, including the one with Greg Sargent and the New Republic. So we've got lots of stuff going on, and we really encourage everybody, when you finish listening to Pete's pods, which you obviously got to do first, come listen to ours.
The DSRnetwork.com to learn more. David Rothkopf, always grateful when I get the opportunity to shoot up with you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
All right, David Rothkopf. He is so great, as always. Love talking to him. Hopefully you appreciated that, the news, and everything else. If you did, go write a review on Spotify and iTunes. Subscribe on YouTube and TikTok and Instagram, Threads, Twitter, and Facebook, and all the rest. Links to all of those in the show notes. Support the stand-up community in so many ways. Find friends, make friends, hang out on the Discord platform. That's all I've got for you. Now, take it away, the two-time Emmy Award-winning John Carroll. JohnCarroll.org. Support him, too.
When you can't see the forest for the burning trees, you got to stand up. Hey, you've been sitting so long, you got the creaky knees, you got to stand up. Stand up. I think you're driving wheels with leaking grease. Boy, you better stand up. Stand up. Well, there's a whole lot more of us who know what's right. They'll keep right on ignoring us if we keep sitting tight. You got to open up the window to let in some light. You got to stand up. That's right. You got to rise up. You got to stand up. You got to stare the devil straight in the eye. We got to let him know it's his turn to go. See it clear when all you hear is a lie. So get up off of your butt, get down off of your fence. Even if it ain't a very friendly audience, they'll begin to listen when you start making sense. And you stand up, stand up. No need to point your rifle to defend your town. Just stand up, stand up. You know they can't deny you what you're laying down. Boy, you better stand up, stand up. Show your face of every color, yellow, black, red, and brown. She's the place where every lost child will finally be found. There's only one thing to do before we stand our ground, and that's stand up, stand up. Well, the founding fathers saw a land for all. They had to stand up, they had to stand up. They had a keen imagination for a crystal ball, drawing all the plans of a stand up. But all they had to go on was the time they were in, with other causes for laws, and since they weren't even sin, they knew that change was gonna come before the change would begin. They had to stand up. All right, they had to stand up. We got to stand up. We got to look the devil square in the eye. We gotta let him know it's his time to go, and make it clear when all we hear is a lie. Why you lying awake wondering where the money all went? It'll be the cost of freedom that'll go unspent. You can see him flee the scene of that experiment if you stand up. Alright, we got to speak up, we got to reach up, and raise your voice in every way you know how. Don't be toes up, you got to show up. Ain't no better time to do it but now. No need to pledge allegiance to no wanton tribe. Rise up, show obedience to the voice inside. And listen well and it'll tell you not to run and hide. It says stand up.